Welcome to our channel today. And I'm excited about the book of Daniel. And I can't wait to get into chapter 1. We've looked at some of the events leading up to this, and certainly the book of Daniel outlines Gentile history, and it opens up the prophetic fantastically, and it lines up with the book of Revelation. It is a mighty prophetic book, but it's got great practical things. It tells us how to stand strong. It talks about the supernatural and dreams and the power of visions and how we can be powerful in a society that's anti-God. And we certainly live in a humanistic society today, but it tells us how to live supernaturally and powerfully, and Daniel's a mighty example. And so we come to Daniel and chapter 1, and I'm reading the first verse. It says, "In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came into Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar." The land of Shinar is it was a plain of Shinar. It was on the plain of Shinar that right back in the beginning that the Tower of Babel, or the Tower of Babel, was built there on that plain, and going right back to Nimrod, to the house of his God. So there in the same place that Nimrod had been, now the articles from the house, from the temple in Jerusalem, they are bringing back sacred items of treasures, or put into the treasure house of their God. Probably Marduk, who was the most popular of their gods, or Bel, or Nago, the god of science and literature, or Aku, the moon god. I'm not sure which temple it was, but it went into his favorite god anyway. And we have this situation now where after 3 exiles, and we talked about that in the introduction, by the 3rd exile, Jerusalem was in ruins. But in this first exile, Daniel was brought in. And they brought these young boys from the royal court. And we read that they were young men in whom there was no blemish, good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge, quick to understand, who had the ability to serve in the king's palace. They knew how to live in the king's court. And they brought them in that they might teach them the language and the literature of the Chaldeans. They actually brought them in, and the Chaldeans were really the group. In fact, the whole of Babylon is actually called Chaldea, but the Chaldeans were soothsayers, sorcerers, people deeply into the occult. They did a lot in interpretation of dreams, signs, very deeply into astrology, amazing actually in their knowledge of the stars, but linked with an understanding and a belief that the gods were controlling the stars. And they were going to teach these young guys how to understand that realm that was not the realm of the living God, the language and the writings and the literature of the Chaldeans. And these young men, we don't know how old they were. I think the estimate is that they were probably 14, 15, maybe 16 years of age, teenagers that had been bought from the royal family. These are princes. Among them is the young man called Daniel. And the king says to them, okay, you're going to change the food you eat. We're actually going to change you into good Babylonians. And we're going to give you new names. And we're also going to give you new food. And we're going to give you new instructions. And we're going to introduce you to the gods of this nation. And obviously our gods are superior because your temple's in ruins and ours is standing. And so these young boys came in, and the king said, you're going to eat certain things. And we all know the story. You're going to eat according to how we eat. And also we're going to give you new names. And so they said, Daniel. And what does the name Daniel mean? Each of the names of these young men were names that included the name of God. Each one either finishes in E-L, or in the case of Azariah, that's not so much there, but Hananiah, Meshach, Daniel, Mishael, Hananiah, Azariah, each one in the name does include the name of God in their name. And so Daniel, the name means God is judge. And they said, you got a new name, Daniel. Your name is Belteshazzar. Your name previously was God is judge, but now you will be Belteshazzar, and not to mix it up with Belshazzar, who was actually the king, or is acting king in chapter 5 when Cyrus came in. So don't mix up Daniel as Belteshazzar with the puppet king or the acting king Belshazzar, just the two different letters in Daniel's name. But you'll find it won't be hard, because even though they call him Belteshazzar for some reason, and obviously Daniel wrote his own book, but he didn't refer to himself as Belteshazzar. He said, no, I'm Daniel, and he uses his own name right through the book. And so they changed his name to Prince of Bel, and it does seem that Bel was their chief god. And then Mishael, the name, or Michael would be the name today, Mishael, and the name means who is like God? Who is like God? And they said, we're going to change your name from Mishael, who is like El, the God of the Jews. We will call you Meshech. And Meshech means who is like Aku, the moon god. So they changed him from who is like the living God to who is like the moon god. And Hananiah, the name means gift of life. They said, we're going to change your name to Shadrach, which means by command of Aku, the moon god. And they're going to change their names. They're going to change their food. They're going to change their teaching. And they're going to absorb them into a new life. They're taking these cream young men, the cream of the crop in education, in wisdom, in training, in everything else, and they're going to show that they can convert them right into the system of Babylon. And certainly that's the aim. The aim in our society is to take our youth and through everything possible convert them so that they move from God-fearing people to humanistic people who are far from God. And then Azariah, the name Azariah means whom Jehovah helps. And they said, you got a new name, Abednego, which basically means servant of Nego, the god of science and literature. And certainly, if we picture Babylon, just get a picture of this city. I try to imagine these young boys carted away so far from their own land, probably never been anywhere out of Israel, and yet now they're transported for weeks, and they arrive at this massive city that rears up with walls hundreds of feet high, and the gates of the city, these massive gates all in blue, radiant blue, and the city, as you look into it, with the massive ziggurats, great big towers that rise up like pyramids flat on the top. And then right in the middle is this massive thing that has been built for Nebuchadnezzar's queen, the Hanging Gardens, which is so extraordinary that people writing about it said it even seemed to go into the clouds. Babylon was extraordinary. It was a city that was, according to Herodotus, the most significant city of the ancient world. An extraordinary place. The Hanging Gardens seemed to be tier upon tier, and so made that as high as you could see were trees and plants and like almost tropical jungles and variation right up like a man-made mountain that filled the city, and great waterways, a city that by today's standard would leave us in total and absolute amazement. And into this city they came. Now, in Babylon, we get an idea when we go to the ancient world that it was all different and we're so much smarter today. Well, the truth is that today, Babylon has influenced so much of our life. They've given us time. Their system, they use a base 60 in their mathematics, and their mathematics was incredibly advanced to the degree where from a base 60, we use a base 10, everything is in a base of 6 or the 60 base, And so in a day or in a year, they have set the year. They set the year at 360 days was the original Babylonian year. We work around a 365 day year. Theirs was a 360, and I guess they had adjustments with that, but they worked around that. It was the Babylonians who worked out time, who got fractions of time, and they worked out a 24-hour day, 24 hours the day, 60 minutes to the hour, and so on, 60 seconds to the minute, and they established time. They established how we calculate time. So when we look at our watch today, I'm old-fashioned, I think, because I still wear one of these on the wrist. The young people don't know what it's for. They have their phones to check the time, but I do have one of these. Oh, no, there's Alvin over there, and he has a watch. Our cameraman, a very young man, has a watch, and so on. So that was a miracle today. That's a joke, anyway. But on their clay tablets, and hundreds of them, the British Museum has one which has the mathematics of the square root of 2, and the Babylonians had it accurate to 6 decimal points. Quite amazing mathematics. They were the inventors of things like trigonometry, geometry, and their maths was incredibly detailed. They're also in the area of astrology. They have set up stuff that is a basis today, particularly in astronomy. Astrology really involved a little bit more of the spiritual side of it. Astronomy, a straight study of the stars. They tracked the planets. They had tracked the planet, particularly the planet Venus. They followed that, and Jupiter. And they worked out mathematically that the moon changes speed in its rotation about the Earth, slowing and then speeding up. They worked out eclipses, accurate astronomical observations that we use today. They were able to predict the sun's motion, and they worked out that it was elliptical, not uniform, and they were way, way ahead. They even had Pythagoras' theorem way, way before Pythagoras came up with it. So they were very, very advanced. They were deeply spiritual, and it was into this culture came these young men to be changed to be good Babylonians. But it's amazing they changed their names, and they couldn't change their God. They tried to change them. We live in a society which, through so many areas, endeavours to change our thinking, to be uniform with society. So much that comes through the media that eventually causes people to change how they think about things. And certainly over the years, particularly starting with the youth, even from the very little kids, the moving from a God base, even a base of understanding that God created the heavens and the earth, to evolution and everything else, has been pushed and pushed and pushed to change people in the way they think, to the degree that if you're in university and you really stand up and say, I'm a creationist, you'll be laughed to scorn, and which is a very, very sad situation. They endeavored to change everything about these boys. They said, okay, you're going to try the king's food. You're going to eat the food of the palace. And Daniel and the boys must have built a relationship with the eunuch that was responsible, and this guy that was looking after them, and they built a relationship with him to such a degree that when he approached them and said, you've got to eat the king's food, you're going to be tested on how much better you are living on the king's food than on the kosher food of the Jews, you're going to be put to the test. They said, please, we don't eat those things. Those things are forbidden to us as Jews. Some of those things we can't eat. Would you give us a simple pulse diet? That's a diet of seeds, grains, vegetables, and they were not going to eat meat that they knew had been offered to idols and so on. They said, give us this basic diet, do it for 10 days. And the man in looking after them, he said, my head is on the line. If I do this and you come out looking bad, my head's on the line. But eventually they convinced him, and they simply ate the Jewish food and went on that for 10 days. And the scripture says in verse 17, at the end of 10 days, God gave them knowledge and skill in all literature, wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in visions and so on. And the Bible says that when they brought them out and examined them alongside the magicians of the day and those being trained in the soothsaying, the Chaldeans, they had 10 times the wisdom. 10 times the wisdom of the rest, which was amazing. They wouldn't be moved. They wouldn't be changed. They stood their ground. Their names were changed, but their hearts weren't. Their circumstances were changed, but they hung on to their God. Extraordinary, outstanding young men, and we're going to find them very, very exciting in the events that are coming up in the next few chapters. It's short today. I trust it's been a blessing. Read it through in your own time. It's full of amazing stuff. God bless you. And again, leave a comment or leave a like. God bless. Thanks today.